from Friends of Gaza University, who is formerly of Medicated Palestinians, and we're lucky enough to have her down to talk about the children of Gaza and the West Bank, and the health situation and education system in Palestine at the moment. So this event is co-hosted by Students of Palestine and Medicine. Students of Palestine is a student group at the university that campaigns to support the rights of Palestinians through awareness raising, through campaigning, and through charity work. And Medicine is a student society here for all students at the university, which campaigns to fight global health injustices around the world, which it does again through education, advocacy, and charity work. So there are some sign-up sheets of both those societies here, which I'll pass around. And if you're not on either of those, email a list, and don't forget to sign up, and we'll let you know about any future events that are going on. And just pass that around. And without further ado, I'll pass you on to Aimee Shalan.
Well, thank you very much for coming along and for having me here this evening. Just to give you a little bit of background about Friends of Gaza University, it's a UK-based charity that works to promote access to education for Palestinians and also the role of education in the wider development of Palestinian society. When the organisation was set up in 1978, Gaza University was really the leading university in Palestine. More recently, and in fact very recently, but just on the 25th of September, we passed a resolution that changes our charitable objects to include other educational, higher and tertiary educational institutions for Palestinians to access. And that means that we're able to work with other universities, both in the West Bank and also in Gaza. I'm losing the light thing. And I've just come back from a trip from the West Bank and Gaza, and so a lot of my talk is going to be about the situation, largely focusing on Gaza, but I will also talk about the West Bank as a way of introduction as well. And please do feel free to ask questions as we go along if you'd like to. So first of all, I just wanted to stress really the extent to which the feeling about Gaza is very much strong in the West Bank. Everywhere that you look in the West Bank, there is graffiti on every wall practically saying Gaza. And this rather beautiful and very tragic mural was on the separation wall in Bethlehem, commemorating, recalling the lives of those 4 children that were gunned down on the beach in Gaza, but actually also talking about all the lost souls in Gaza. Now, it's also something that's been taken up by the municipalities. In Ramallah, for instance, this is one of the posters that was just outside the municipality there saying, "From Ramallah, we are all Gaza." And just outside where I was staying as well, there was a billboard that was an advertising billboard where they were advertising toothpaste and various other things. And then amongst all of that, there were suddenly pictures of Gaza and then a large poster about the boycott. And the boycott movement inside Palestine has taken a real new strength during the offensive, Israel's offensive on Gaza, as people started to stop buying Israeli produce in the local shops as well. I just wanted to put that as a little bit of background, largely because what has been a consistent effort over the past few years is a policy by Israel to separate Gaza from the West Bank. And it's very important to see that people have been very motivated around what has happened, and that separation is something that people are resisting very fervently, despite the political differences that still remain internally. Now, when we look at the situation in the West Bank, it's very easy, having just gone through what's happened in Gaza, to forget what's actually going on also in the West Bank. And what has been a pattern for a long time now has been the excessive use of force by the Israeli military. And what hasn't really been in the news headlines is the fact that between the 12th of June and the 31st of August this year, 27 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank, largely during demonstrations about what has been going on in Gaza, and many of them. 5 of those were fatalities were children, and the youngest victim was 11 years old. This year, until now, to date, 41 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank. And if we compare that to the same period last time, it's a significant increase, as 14 were killed during the same period. And a total of 4,309 Palestinians have been injured in the West Bank. And 3,102 of those were injured just in the months between June and August. And those included 460 children. So if we just cast our minds back to where the summer really began, and it began with a military crackdown in the West Bank, following the abduction and killing of 3 Israeli teenagers. As a result of that, from the period between June to August, Israeli forces have carried out 1,470 search and arrest operations and detained 2,200 Palestinians. 770 of those were just in the month of June, which is the highest figure that the UN has recorded since it began its Protection of Civilians database in 2005. And by the end of August, there were 473 administrative detainees, which basically means they've been imprisoned without trial or charge or trial. And around 200 Palestinian children were detained just in East Jerusalem. During that crackdown, also 1,400 houses were raided, and at least 280 cases of reported damage to furniture and other belongings were also reported. And at least 47 of those houses were occupied by Israeli forces for long periods, so either for several hours or up to a few days as well. Now, those kinds of raids have an immense traumatic effect, particularly on families, but particularly on children. And there have been reports of increased levels of fear, insecurity, frustration, lethargy, depression, anger. And all of those things have a pervasive impact on children's self-confidence, on their family relationships, and also their future education. It's also really worth remembering that these military operations were occurring during the exam period in Palestine. So the Tawjihi exam period was going on. So a lot of the exams were being disrupted. And those very important exams, they're the ones that allow students to enter university. They're the equivalent, I guess, to our A-levels. 5 schools that were either inside or next to Tufa village in Hebron were occupied by Israeli forces. One of them was occupied for 4 days, and there was minor damage that went on in that school, but there were also signs of urination that were in the kitchen and the classrooms afterwards. And you can imagine again what kind of an impact that has on children when they know that their school, which should be considered a safe space, has been raided in that kind of a fashion. And as a result, the YMCA has been stepping up its work with its psychosocial teams across the West Bank. They've been conducting, just in those months, 518 interventions, providing support for children and families that have been affected by those raids, and also arrest and detention and house demolitions. Now, just at the end of last month, there were 6 very violent incidents that occurred in just 1 week, that were either inside or next to educational facilities, again disrupting classes and again resulting in injuries. And the gravest one was on the 24th of September. A lot of these incidents often follow or claims of stone throws of children, and then involve Israeli forces firing rubber bullets. And this time it was towards a school in the Old City in Jerusalem. It ended up with the injury of 3 children, all of whom were shot in the upper part of their bodies, including one in their head. And on 4 different days, Israeli forces stationed near a secondary school in Bethlehem also fired tear canisters towards students as they were leaving the school premises. So it is a process of harassment that is going on. And on the 24th of September in Tulkarem also, 350 students were evacuated after they started firing tear gas canisters into the school. And that was again following an alleged stone throwing incident that evolved into clashes that had originated by the gate near the school. So these are the kinds of incidents that have been happening for a long time. They've been happening over the previous years, but there's definitely been an increase since June of this year. There's also immense fear, particularly in East Jerusalem, following attempts by settlers to kidnap children. So again, during the same week in September, it was reported that there was a failed attempt to kidnap an 11-year-old Palestinian in East Jerusalem. After that, the boy himself was actually detained by Israeli forces. So you can imagine that not only are you the victim of an attack, but then you end up being detained by the Israeli forces and somehow held to blame in some kind of way. And there have been 5 such reports in East Jerusalem since June, so there is quite a lot of fear amongst parents about letting their children actually go to and from school as well. And those 5 kidnapping reports are excluding the murder, kidnapping and murder of Mohammed Abu Khadr, who I think you probably would have heard about, who was the boy who was burnt to death by settlers in July. And it was after that that an enormous amount of fear has taken hold. So that's a little bit of the background of how tense the situation is in the West Bank at the moment.